Thank you. Thank you.
That was President Biden earlier today, shortly after his 2024 announcement. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris speaking today alongside abortion rights groups here in Washington. For more, let's bring in CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns, who is attending the vice president's event this evening, and CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe from the White House. Ed, you spoke with a member of Congress and the Biden campaign co-chair. Tell us more about that conversation.
That's right. So the campaign is underway, and he announced a national leadership. It's a collection of names that are well known to Democrats across the country: the Michigan governor, Gretchen Whitmer, the senator from Illinois, Tammy Duckworth, the entertainment mogul, Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's among one of the most generous donors to Democratic campaigns. But Lisa Blunt Rochester is the congresswoman from the president's home state of Delaware. And we talked to her about these concerns that Democrats have about whether or not he should be running again. Take a look. Nearly half of Democrats don't want him running again, and they overwhelmingly cite his age as a reason. There's been some other polling this week that suggests age is a major reason why people don't think he should do this again. He's 80 now. He'd be 86 at the end of a second term. What does the Biden-Harris campaign say to the concerns, the overwhelming concerns of Democrats and Americans overall, that he may be too old to do this job?
Well, you know, I like to think back to what he says when people bring that up, which is just watch me. And he has demonstrated, as I mentioned, that he's been able to bring transformational change. And even in this last election, I think one of the reasons why you did not see that big red wave in the House was because people recognize that he is doing an incredible job. And, you know, to the point of excitement, that's part of our job. That's part of my job as a co-chair of the campaign. That's part of his job as he gets on the campaign trail, is for people to see it, believe it, and feel it.
And I realize it's early, but have you had any discussions yet with the campaign team about what campaigning looks like in 2024? The reason I ask is, of course, he spent so much of the pandemic campaign in 2020 literally campaigning from home, and it worked. So is there a discussion yet about how much out in the country in-person stuff he's going to do versus either campaigning from here at the White House and in the virtual space?
Well, I think today's a good example. I mean, he launched the video and he is already out on the campaign trail, again, meeting with union workers. And I think the difference is going to be that we're not in the midst of a pandemic, and we will be able to get out and about across the country.
One thing we should point out is a difference with a distinction. The event today was actually an official White House presidential event, not a campaign event. So she says he was on a campaign trail. No, he was up at the Washington Hilton talking to loyal constituency, labor unions. And we should point out, not only did he announce his 2020 bid 4 years ago today, but the first appearance he made after officially becoming a candidate was in front of a labor union crowd. So they're clearly trying to replicate some of the success from 4 years ago.
Maybe not a formal campaign event, but something certainly with the spirit of a campaign. Caitlin, you've been covering campaign events and campaign-spirited events all day. Tell us more about what your latest reporting is.
Well, earlier today, we were following Nikki Haley. She's a Republican candidate for president, and she was giving a speech on the issue of abortion. Tonight, we are covering Kamala Harris, the vice president, who was actually featured pretty prominently in that Biden reelection campaign video amid questions about, whether she would whether there were Democratic concerns about her being on the ticket again, kind of put that to rest. She's giving a speech tonight. She's addressing pro-abortion rights groups here in Washington. And so this really shows, this kind of split screen shows that the issue of abortion is going to be a key issue in the campaign, really for both sides. We've seen it be a galvanizing issue for Democrats especially. We saw that in the midterms, and we saw that most recently several weeks ago in that Wisconsin State Supreme Court race. Republicans that we've been talking to acknowledge that this is something that they have to contend with in a post-Dobbs world. But we've also seen Republicans really struggle to define a position in terms of what they want the federal government to do now that this has been kicked back to the states. You've seen some Republicans kind of tie themselves in knots trying to figure out how to respond to this issue. Mike Pence, who you spoke with over the weekend in Iowa, was very clear on his position of wanting some kind of federal minimum standard. And that question has been posed to others like Nikki Haley. So Nikki Haley today wanted to show that she is not only trying to appeal to Republican primary voters with a anti-abortion stance in the states, but also try to reach out to swing voters. So it kind of shows how she's trying to thread that needle, and said that she wants to be a national consensus builder on this. She argued that any sort of ban that has been passed in the states wouldn't be able to pass at the federal level, given that you would need a supermajority in the Senate. But still, there are questions about what exactly her position would be. But I thought it was significant because she is trying to reach out on this issue. But it's a tricky one because on one hand, you have to have those on the base, and on the other hand, you have to reach out to those swing voters who Republicans have lost and who, data shows are more, in tune with this issue.
Terrific insights. Ed, how does that all play into the Biden White House and their strategy moving ahead?
Well, if you look at that campaign release video, and if you look at where the vice president's going, Howard University, right where Caitlin is later today, Democrats are ready to and eager to make the future of access to abortion services a key part of their campaign, seeing how successful it was in some key states last year, and knowing that it remains a top-of-mind concern for so many voters. So you'll see him talk about that, about protecting gay rights, criticizing Republicans for banning books in schools, protecting Social Security, arguing that taxes for working-class Americans should be kept lower or cut, and the broader issue of defending and sustaining democracy, not only here in the United States, but around the world. That's a lot to work with to start, and a lot of that is base motivating. But it's also, especially in terms of abortion rights, Social Security, defending democracy, issues that recent elections show are popular with voters across the spectrum, and that's what the president's going to need in order to get to 270 plus yet again in November 24.
Caitlin, how do your Republican sources assess the Biden reelection campaign?
Well, it's interesting, Bob, because Republicans that we have talked to, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, in interviews, I've asked them, is Biden's age an issue? Do you have any problems with his mental and physical abilities? And they wouldn't engage on that issue. They said that their issues are with his policies. And that is interesting because you do have, the Republican Party trying to draw these contrasts, but at the same time, they are contending with the idea that Donald Trump, who is the same age as Biden, essentially leading in those Republican polls. So there is a little bit of a difficult position that Republicans are in, trying to say that they want to turn the page without trying to alienate Trump on age. One of those who has gone there is Nikki Haley, however. Remember when she announced her campaign, she said that there should be a competency test for politicians over a certain age that would have included Biden and Donald Trump. There aren't many yet that agree with her, at least on the official side, people who are running. But that is something that they're thinking about. So, whether it will be a Trump-Biden rematch, we're still waiting for other candidates on the Republican side to jump in. Ron DeSantis, as you know, is, thinking about and positioning himself for a run. So there's still a lot to be shaken out on the Republican side. And their issue is that they have to not only draw contrasts with Trump to be able to identify themselves as, someone who can beat him, but also someone that can beat Biden. So this electability in terms of not only the general, but in terms of the primary are themes overarching in that race right now.
Caitlin Huey-Burns and Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.